Welcome to Climate Fix Podcast. Here we dive into evidence-based solutions to climate change and various other pressing environmental issues. This podcast is created by Americans for Nuclear Energy, a pro-nuclear environmental organization. We take no money from industry or special interest groups. All donations are from individuals like you, interested in a grassroots scientific movement to solve the world's most pressing scientific problem, global climate change. We hope you approach these ideas with humanism and an open mind. Our mission statement is as follows. Nuclear energy is safe, cheap, plentiful, clean, and efficient. It has the capability to stop and reverse climate change while addressing the ever-growing demand for electricity globally. We strive to educate American citizens about this technology and to dispel misconceptions with facts. We firmly believe that both human civilization and industrialism can easily coexist with a healthy environment. Join us in helping to plan a prescription for a feverish planet, or as we like to say, a climate fix.
This is your host, Phil Ord.
And this is your co-host, DJ LeClaire.
The name of this episode is called Beyond the Oil Rig. Here we talk to Americans for Nuclear Energy's own team member and podcast producer, Jona Adams, about her technology company she started, called Poseidon Atomic Energy Corporation. Poseidon Atomic's goal is to create huge, incredibly energetic nuclear reactor platforms at sea, dedicated to the synthesis of large amounts of zero-net-emission hydrocarbon fuel, as an alternative to oil extraction and refining. The hope is to make the production of gasoline, diesel, or jet fuel as cheap or cheaper than fuels derived from petroleum. Because this synthesized fuel is made from a feedstock of carbon dioxide gas, it would produce zero net emissions after burning. Poseidon Atomic fuel could replace the petroleum-based fuels in transportation, therefore helping to decarbonize the sector.
Here's a little bit about Jona. Jona Adams was born and raised in Flint, Michigan, an auto manufacturing town that was the heart of the automotive manufacturing industry. She joined the Marines right out of high school and served in the Corps for 7 years. She went on to college at the University of Michigan and studied science and business. For the last 20 years, she has worked in various businesses in her sales career. Jona has been a big part of the online community, advocating for nuclear, and volunteers here at Americans for Nuclear Energy as the Climate Fix podcast editor and producer. In early 2020, Jona started Poseidon Atomic Energy Corporation, a C Corp, which we will be talking about today.
Awesome. Jona is a very hardworking person and does so much for our organization. It takes a lot of time and skill to produce a podcast, so we are in debt to her. Jona has been a tireless advocate for nuclear power as the only way to really bring about deep cuts in carbon emissions. She is a no-nonsense climate activist and has her eye on the prize: total decarbonization of all sectors of the economy. This is why she is focused on the vision of Poseidon Atomic, which would help decarbonize the part of the economy that will be the hardest, transportation. She truly wants to find a replacement for oil that does not add extra greenhouse gas to the atmosphere.
That's great. It's incredible to know such forward-thinking and solutions-oriented people. Not many people sit down to think about decarbonizing transportation fuels by chemical synthesis using clean energy. This is a really good idea, as it will be hard to convert all transportation to electric. We will need liquid hydrocarbons for a while yet, so making them carbon neutral would be truly groundbreaking and extremely useful. Hopefully we can get to a point where we can produce all the carbon neutral synthetic fuel we want without ever drilling for oil again. Jona's vision is a glimpse of such a future.
Super excited to hear what she has to say. This seems like a really cool idea and right up our alley.
For sure. Well, without further ado, here's our conversation with Jona.
Jona, it's good to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Jona, what is the mission of Poseidon Atomic Energy Corporation?
Well, to put it in a nutshell, I would describe it as a nuclear-powered chemical company is essentially what it is. It would be a world's first. But the mission is to utilize nuclear energy to sequester CO2 out of the ocean, and from that synthesize hydrocarbons such as gasoline, diesel, kerosene, or possibly some other fuel types.
Would that include ammonia?
Possibly. So, I mean, I've been hearing a lot about ammonia, I think from the past episodes on Anne. I'm not really sure how big the ammonia economy is, but I can tell you that gasoline sold 14 billion gallons in this country alone. So market share wise, you know, gasoline has the largest potential for growth.
Yeah, I bet.
Switching over like ships to ammonia, I mean, I think there may be some benefits to that. It may be like relatively easier to synthesize pneumonia, but the downside is that pneumonia is extremely toxic to the marine environment. So if there's a fuel spill, it's dangerous on a level that's beyond a hydrocarbon that's getting spilled into the ocean.
Oh, yeah, I can concur with that. I used to handle that when I was working on ships, adding it to reactors. Actually, that stuff's nasty.
Bad news bears.
Yeah, yeah. So, what gave you the inspiration to or for starting a company with such a bold mission?
The need, you know, when they talk about solving climate change, it's almost solely focused on the electric grid, okay? And the electric grid, the electricity consumption accounts for about 25% of the world's total energy usage. And that's maybe even being a bit generous. In the United States, it's about 35%. So if you're only addressing 25 to 35% of the energy consumption in, you know, changing the calculus for how, you know, how we stop climate change, you know, settling on the electric grid is not good enough.
Yeah.
You know, and it's beyond just like automobiles. It's beyond just getting in your car and driving around or riding the bus. You know, there's manufacturing. The entire it just baffles me how people are oblivious to the fact that all manufacturing of all the goods and services that we consume is all powered by fossil fuel right now. And there is absolutely no plan in place. There's not even one iota of thought from COP25, the Paris Accords, all the chatter from all these people who are completely alarmed about climate change. Nobody mentions manufacturing.
Right.
And it's just mind-boggling. You know, when they produce a solar panel, that solar panel was produced with fossil fuel. You know, it starts with mining materials. So, you know, you've got some sort of heavy machinery to dig up sand. The sand has to be processed into a pure form of the right type of sand to turn it into glass or what have you, silicate, okay? And then it goes through an entire process in a factory to turn the sand into a solar panel. And that whole process is done electronically, and that electricity is generally being produced with coal power. Okay, over 65% of the solar panels that we buy in this country come from China. And China is ramping up their coal production. The lion's share of their electricity is powered by coal. So if we want to buy a bunch of solar panels from China, we're just offloading our carbon footprint to China through their manufacturing. And then they get loaded onto a ship and sent over here, and we feel good about putting these things up, but they only produce power 2-3 hours a day.
I think you bring up a good point about how we focus so much on electricity when we have transportation fuel, which is not going to go away anytime quickly. And, you know, we need to find a way to decarbonize that. And how do we do that? You know, it's kind of mind-boggling.
So the idea of Poseidon, you know, why we need companies like Poseidon Atomic to make mines and factories and the whole base of the manufacturing economy actually carbon neutral. And it's powered with carbon neutral synthetic fuels. You can produce solar panels carbon neutral. You can produce batteries carbon neutral. You can produce shirts and shoes and whiskey and everything else that you want to produce carbon neutral with carbon neutral synthetic fuels. But on a massive global scale, we're introducing all this extra CO2 into the atmosphere. 1/3 of it every single year is being absorbed into the ocean. So there's what they call the Great Dying, which was 500 million years ago. You know, that was an entire process where massive amounts of CO2 were ejected into the atmosphere. The ocean became hypoxic. That means that there wasn't enough oxygen in the ocean to support the life that was in the ocean. And there's certain types of bacteria that live in the ocean at all times, but they're kind of tamped down. As the ocean becomes more hypoxic, this certain type of bacteria grows, and there's examples of it. They call it a red tide. It's a natural thing, but as the ocean becomes more hypoxic, it's becoming a more regular occurrence in places like Florida. You don't want to be anywhere around near a red tide because it emits something called hydrogen sulfide, which is poisonous. They use it in chemical weapons. But if we continue on this gangbusters approach to putting CO2 into the atmosphere and more of the CO2 gets absorbed into the ocean, you know, eventually it's going to reach a point of saturation. So that, you know, everyone's concerned about rising air temperatures, things like shifting climate zones, the ice caps melting, which is alarming. It's not something to make light of. But the thing that we're really kind of ignoring is the dangers of an ocean becoming more acidic.
Right.
So the mission of Poseidon Atomic is to cut off the need to extract hydrocarbons from the Earth's crust, instead just remove them out of the ocean and eliminate the need to
drill for oil.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the current status of your company right now?
So I filed for a C corporation in the state of Oregon almost exactly a year ago. And so I was kind of like in my bootstrap phase, is what they call it. And then COVID hit. So at the moment, you know, I was at that point I was pretty much in survival mode. So I ended up moving to Michigan, stay with some family for a while, and then after I got my federal relief for small businesses unrelated to Poseidon Atomic, related to a different business, I moved down to North Carolina. So now we're kind of starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The vaccine is coming out. It's getting distributed. You know, hopefully we can get to some sense of normalcy.
Just takes a while.
It's going to take a while, but I mean, we are going to get there. Everything comes and goes, and this thing is going to go. So we're basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is we're at the level of still needing to get seed funding. I'd file as my chief, technical officer.
At file of Elysium Industries, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Got it.
And
Good to tell our listeners.
I'm kind of working with the CEO of Elysium as well, because he has more experience at this than I do. I'm not really looking to be the boss or anything. Like, that's not really important to me. The thing that's important to me the most is to see this vision come true. So if being CEO is what it takes to make that happen, then that's what will happen. If there's somebody out there that I can bring on that will be a better CEO than me, then by all means, I'll put them in charge. And as long as they follow the mission of the company, which is to, save the ocean and save humanity. That's the motto of the company, and whoever comes aboard needs to believe in that and really understand that to the fullest degree.
That's awesome. What other company can be like, oh, we're trying to save humanity? There's not too many that are up to that challenge. So what is your first goal you have set to your next step for Poseidon? Like, what's the next step you have in your mind right now?
We need to get some seed funding, $50,000, $100,000, basically just even the smallest investment would make a huge difference.
For sure.
So basically I could go full time and into raising more money. At that point, we need to start outsourcing talent in a number of different areas.
Are you gonna try spitting a proposal to Elon Musk for that funding?
Yeah, I saw that article. I don't know how to get it over to him. Maybe he's listening to this podcast. So
I don't know about that, but
well, you never know. You never know.
Got it. Well, you at least got the paperwork filed. That's a good step.
Yeah, a C corporation. It's kind of in between. It's not an LLC. Okay, an LLC is basically a self-proprietary. As far as IRS is concerned, you're a self-proprietor if you're an LLC. A C corporation is one level below an S corp. When you're an S corp, you can sell shares on the stock exchange and things like that. So we can't do that, but we can sell shares on private side.
Gotcha. So switching gears a little bit here, but so what gave you the idea of an offshore platform?
So the idea of sequestering CO2 and hydrogen out of the ocean and with nuclear energy first came to my head from an article that I read that was written about the Naval Research Lab. This is I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that now. And it was very intriguing. I remember the first time I saw the headline, I had to reread it because it was from a very technical publication. I can't remember which one it was, but I'm like, diesel from seawater? What?
Yeah, I think I remember which one that is. Yeah.
Or being able to refuel your jet fighters at sea instead of having a big tanker come and fill you up.
Yeah, so that was very intriguing. But when I got to the very bottom of the article, I remember they were saying that they were estimating that the price of their fuel was going to be about $8 to $12 a gallon. Oh. I'm like, oh, that's never going to work on a massive economic scale. So, it just kind of registered in my mind, well, that sounds like a really neat experiment, but somehow we need to figure out how to do it cheaper. I've got no idea how to do that, so I just moved on with my life. But when I started getting involved with the nuclear advocacy side of things a few years ago. I had the pleasure of talking, exchanging ideas and kind of talking with different people through social media, and then I came across that file, and his reactor really kind of set my mind on fire, because I'm like, wow, this guy's got a reactor that, number one, it runs off of garbage, okay, nuclear waste. That's pretty cheap fuel, right? And number two, when you fuel it, you don't have to fuel it again for 4 decades.
Jeez.
So, I mean, that has to make a huge impact, because here's the thing: if you're going up against a oil rig, okay, if you think about it, an oil rig is powered by fossil fuel. It's got to run a pump. It's got to pump the oil up, and then somehow it's got to get the oil to shore. So it can either do it through a pipeline, or it can load it onto a ship and ship it back to shore. And then when it gets to the shoreline, it gets refined. And that whole refinery process, that's all done with heat. And that heat is generated by burning more fossil fuel. It's kind of ironic, that your gasoline that you're putting in your car already has a carbon footprint before you even burn it, because there's this whole process of getting it. So that's kind of the secret sauce with our company, using an Elysium reactor. We don't have to fuel it every 4 years like other reactors.
So an offshore platform would, like having it all on one platform, like you don't have to worry about all those transportation costs. You can just produce gasoline or whatever hydrocarbons you want on site.
Yeah. So it's basically, we would be able to do 2 for 1, right there on the spot, because we don't have to. I mean, we'll have to pump a lot of water, like 120,000 gallons per minute.
That actually kind of answers my next question, which is, why is the ocean a good place to put such a piece of equipment?
So the advantages of doing it out at sea there's a lot. For one, when you're building stuff on land, it doesn't matter what you're building. You could build, high rise, or you could build a shopping mall, or whatever. It doesn't matter. No matter what you're building, you always have to take into consideration, what you're building on. What's the bedrock? What are the runoff situations? There's all of these basic engineering things that go into building anything on land. Okay, so it's really hard to duplicate the exact same contraption if you have that variable that's constantly unique in every single location that you're in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why reactors can get so expensive. You're basically doing new designs each time.
And you have no choice, because if you're cooling off of a river, that river is completely unique. There's no exact shoreline that's going to be like that anywhere else in the world. So it's always going to be a unique situation. But when you're out at sea, it's always going to be the exact same situation, right? So you can build the exact same thing. Well, I mean, whatever it is that we're building, it has to be able to weather a storm. But that's another thing too. If you look at what they do during hurricanes, if you have a really big ship and it's docked,
take it out to sea.
You know what they do when a big storm comes? They put it out to sea, because it's actually safer out at sea than it is at the dock.
Yep, I've had personal experience with that. Like when on the carrier, when I was on a carrier, they would take it out to sea during hurricanes when they hit. Instead of because that's really bad to be right docked at next to a pier.
Yeah, it's international waters too, so you probably deal with a little bit less regulatory headache too.
That's another thing, or even politically, just on a not in my backyard type of political issue. Nobody's going to be showing up to protest. We don't want this nuclear reactor here in my backyard when you're 200 miles out to sea.
Right, and the reason why being at sea makes so much sense is because the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dissolves in water, and it becomes a little bit more concentrated than trying to pull the carbon dioxide right out of the air. So you're sitting on your feedstock basically.
It's about 15 times more dense in water than it is in the atmosphere. I mean, if it makes sense because, if you think about it, water is much more dense than air. And sequestering out of air is actually very difficult. If you take a look at the contraption that they've invented to sequester CO2 out of atmosphere, it looks like a nightmare.
Yeah, for sure.
There is multiple ways of degasifying. That's the phrase that they use in water treatment, degasification. Okay, and there's a number of different methods for degasifying CO2. What's a little bit different that we're trying to do is degasify salt water. So there's a little bit of difference there because most degasification is focused on fresh water.
Degasification means removing gas from a liquid.
Yeah, it can be a multiple different target gases, but we're after CO2 and hydrogen.
So what kind of chemical process would be used to extract that carbon dioxide and hydrogen from seawater and turn it into hydrocarbon fuel?
I mean, it's relatively simple. I mean, removing the CO2, it's a process called degasification. There's a number of ways of approaching degasification. I kind of have my eyes set on a product by 3M. So it's something that we could just go and buy right now. It's not like something that we have to invent, okay? And then the other part of it is, extracting the hydrogen. That's basic high school chemistry experiment stuff.
Just cracking off the hydrogen with electricity.
It's a little bit more challenging with salt water, but it has to be with salt water. I want to avoid, having to resort to going to fresh water as much as possible, because then we're talking about desalination, and when desalination requires energy. So if I start putting more into desalination and expend more energy, I will do it if there's no better way of doing it, because honestly, I don't really need that much hydrogen for every 120,000 gallons of water that I pump. I just need a fraction, because I just need the right ratio of hydrogen to meet the CO2 extraction from the water.
Well, it's a good thing you're on a big vat of hydrogen-rich water, So
yeah.
Wait, what was the name of that process? I think I talked to you sometime earlier about this, but what was the name of it? It was like a special one.
There's the process of actually synthesizing these gases is called the Fissure process. So basically, from CO2, you take off an oxygen molecule, so then it becomes carbon monoxide, and then from there you run into this process called the Fissure-Tropsch process, which has been around for almost exactly 100 years. There's different feedstocks.
It's on Wikipedia. I looked at it earlier.
There's been different feedstocks. It was most popularized during World War II. I think that it kind of seems like the Germans to this day are probably the biggest experts on it. I know there is some talent here on this side of the Atlantic on the Fissure-Tropsch process as well. So,
do they take advantage of, or do you take advantage of the heat in the, or at all in the process, like from the reactor?
So our goal is to get to a 50% conversion rate. So I want to convert 50% of the heat into fuel. That's the goal, and it's doable because we can do it with electricity. It's doable with electricity. We can do it with this. So if we can get higher than 50%, we certainly want to do that. But that's kind of like the baseline goal and kind of where I'm kind of basing my production off of. So the best way of doing that is to avoid converting heat into electricity. So instead converting heat into mechanical energy like pumps and other processes like the Fissure-Tropsch process, which involves pressurizing gases and applying heat, like around 250 C. So
I think you've have alluded to this a little bit, but what kind of nuclear reactor would you use, and how much energy would you produce with it?
So we're dead set on the Elysium Industries reactor, that they're fast spectrum neutron reactor. Because it runs off, it has to be that reactor because one, it can go up to 5 gigawatts, okay, which is, I mean, you can do 5 gigawatts. You can do a reactor out at sea, all right, but you can't do a light water 5 gigawatt reactor out at sea. It's just too big, right? You've got that big containment dome, and it's just a monster. So this reactor, it's relatively small and powerful. So that's one thing that's really going for it that no other reactor offers. The other is that it runs off of nuclear waste, so our fuel costs will be very, very, very low.
You're dealing with molten salt, so you have access to these really great temperatures.
Very high temperatures, yeah. To do things like, run water pumps and supply plenty of heat for the production of the, to run the Fischer-Tropsch process. So, some portion of that heat is going to have to be converted into electricity, but it's going to be, a relatively small amount, because most of that heat's going to be used for pumping water and running the chemical processes.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, it's going to be very, very energy intensive, but what better way to do that than with a 5 gigawatt, molten salt reactor?
Yeah, I mean, 5 gigawatts is no joke. That's enough to power a small, like a mid-sized city.
Like you could definitely produce some hardcore hydrocarbons that way. So
yeah, I don't think it has to be a lithium reactor. I don't think we can do it with any other reactor, to be honest.
Awesome. Yeah, so if people want to check out the Elysium reactor, you can find Elysium Industries online too. So how much hydrocarbon fuel would one of these platforms with a reactor produce? Okay, so an Elysium reactor can produce 5 gigawatts thermal, not electric, okay? So if you convert that into kilowatts, that's 5 million kilowatts. If we can do a 50% conversion, that gives us a conversion of 2,500,000 watts converted into, say, gasoline. Now, 1 gallon of gasoline equals 34 kilowatts. So if we just divide the converted energy, which is 2.5 million kilowatts, by 34 kilowatts, that comes out to a little over 73,000 gallons per hour. And over a 24-hour period, that's over 1.7 million gallons per day. And over 365 days, that's, we're talking maximum output, of course, over 600 million gallons per year. And, I'm sure there's going to be some maintenance time where we're not going to be able to produce at full capacity 365 days, 24 hours a day. So, if we figure in a 90% uptime, we're still kind of, around, 550 million gallons per year, maybe 600,000 or 600 million gallons per year. That's a lot of fuel. Just to put that in perspective, the United States of America consumes about 14 billion gallons per year. So if we can produce 500 million gallons per year per reactor, it would take about 28 to 30 of these facilities to produce all of the gasoline for the entire country for a year. Really?
That's pretty remarkable. Jeez.
I mean, yeah, like 25 facilities in the middle of the ocean of clean nuclear power producing zero carbon, hydrocarbon fuels. It's, I mean, no wonder why so many people are interested in this type of thing.
Right. And no wonder why everyone's trying to get us diverted over to this bullcrap. Others, I think they're trying to tell other non-solutions, like,
there we go.
Disclaimer, we support all sources of carbon-free electricity, but we like some better than others.
Honestly, like, everyone's, trying to tell us, like, do methanol or, do this or that, anything but gasoline. So I think there's people that are trying to pull our chains here because they're afraid of change. But here, the people that are afraid of change are kicking themselves in the butt, because, I mean, they're the ones who the people that are the most afraid of this are the ones who actually have the most to gain from it. So if they just open their ears and listen, they're going to realize that if you do business this way, you're going to make more money than ever. Okay.
Because you won't have all
Because
those oil rig costs.
you won't have all those oil rig costs. Look, these things will never run dry. Your oil rigs run dry.
Yep.
Yeah.
You dry up the well, and then you got to pick up and go find another spot. This will never run out. You can put this thing down; it will never run out. You don't have to fuel it. It's fueled for 4 decades. So
Right.
I mean, the potential for cost overhead savings is massive here. We're talking many, many billions of dollars. And I've had some other people say, well, how do you think that you should be getting the carbon tax? Okay, here's the thing. All energy, no matter where it comes from, is the baseline for the economy. Like, the only people that aren't partaking in fossil fuel right now are the people. There's like some indigenous tribes down in South America. There's like a few like hermits up in like Siberia. Everyone else is consuming energy.
Well,
Yeah.
if there was like a carbon price, though, it seems like the idea would be that if you're making zero net emission fuel, that would not be priced, and that could give you an advantage.
Well, but taxes are taxes. I mean, it doesn't matter what you call it. Taxes are taxes. Okay.
I think we might be talking about two different things here. Like, are you saying that taxes in general are already taxed on carbon, so we don't need a carbon tax? I'm kind of confused.
I don't care. You can call it whatever you want. Call it a carbon tax. Call it a happy day tax. Call it, support whatever tax. Okay. A tax is a tax. So that's money that's being peeled off, and that goes to pay for, all the things in the government.
We're talking about prices and stuff, DJ.
Yeah. So I know you alluded to this, or you mentioned the whole, what is it, $12 a gallon. Like, holy crap, that's ridiculous. I remember the last time I checked, I think they were saying maybe $3 to $6 per gallon, which if you're sitting in the Middle East, that's that's actually pretty cheap, because you don't have to pay to send people out to get fuel and bring it to you. But when it comes to your rigs sitting out offshore and whatnot, and supplying fuel for people to use, like in the U.S., let's say, how cheap would it have to be per volume of fuel to compete with petroleum-derived fuels?
I don't think it has to be that much cheaper. Only a little bit cheaper. It doesn't take a whole lot. You don't have to be much cheaper for everyone to buy your stuff. Years ago, I used to sell cars, and I'd be dealing with like a $50,000 car, and somebody would say, you know what, I want a price on this car, and then you give them the price, and they go off and they get someone else's price, and they call you back, and they're like, I'm going to go buy my car from this other dealer because they beat you by $50. $50 on a $50,000 car. Okay. The only reason why that other dealership won is because they beat us $50 on a $50,000 car. It didn't take much,
Right.
to take the business away. So we don't have to be significantly cheaper, just a teeny bit cheaper than everyone else.
What's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Especially with a commodity like gasoline, whatever's cheapest will win out.
Yeah. So the important thing here is that it's the investor that really matters, because it's what is going to be cheaper for the investor. From my perspective, that's what matters. So what is going to be the biggest payoff for the lowest investment over time? And I think the advantage that we're offering over the status quo method of producing gasoline, for example. We don't have to, that whole entire process of pumping the oil up, putting it over to shore, processing it for, in a refinery, like, that's all going to be eliminated. The refinery is going to be right on site. So we can either run a pipeline or load ships, right with the right product, the raw material. So if we're synthesizing gasoline, it would still need to have the additives put into it. If you buy like Shell gasoline, they put their additives in it, and that's their their formula for their gas. If you buy Exxon, it's their formula because they put their additives. Right. So there's still like, we're looking to just sell to the wholesale market, and then, whoever buys it can do, make it their own however they want. So we're just focusing on producing the baseline product. So we're not interested in having Poseidon Atomic gas stations, up and down the freeways. So we're not trying to disrupt things that way. We're just looking to change the way that the carbon, hydrocarbons are produced on the back end.
I can imagine a company like, say, BP or something, or Shell, just like advertising like, we're the first, like we have our fuels comes from completely carbon neutral sources. Like, of course, everyone else would be jumping on board, but
right.
Well, I would hope that when companies start to understand, they're always virtue signaling with like things that don't even really exist. Like we're using, we're growing algae to figure out new ways to. Oh yeah, like your green slime is really going to save the world. Like, really? But you guys know what I'm talking about.
What would exactly save the world is a gasoline you can fill up your car with and not feel like you're contributing to climate change. And then you literally aren't. And it's just like, oh, you don't have money for an electric car, you like your gas car better? Well, if your gas is clean, who cares?
Yeah, so what we're offering, for the public, it's a solution to climate change. For the investor, we're offering a way to basically get a better bang for your buck on investment over a long term. The average price of gasoline is about $1 a gallon. That's the 10-year average on the wholesale.
At gross or on wholesale, got it.
Yeah, on the wholesale market. That's before they put the additives in or anything like that. So if one facility can produce 500 million gallons a year, that's, just roughly $500 million worth of revenue per year. Kind of guessing that it's going to be maybe around $3 billion per platform. Essentially, what we're looking at is about a 6-year payoff where, the entire capital costs are recovered within 6 years. So the only thing you have to worry about at that point is your operational costs.
Yeah.
And then you've got another 34 years of operation.
Yeah, if you can just get the price to like, heck, if you got it to like 70 cents a gallon for the fuel wholesale price, you'd win. You'd just win automatically.
I think we have to go that far. If the average price is 90, is say $1, we're at 98 cents. Or everyone would want ours instead of theirs.
Exactly.
I'm curious if it would stay pretty stable as well compared to from other sources, the costs. Have you factored that in? Like, because it's just sitting out there churning it out. Like, what changes but the cost of the labor?
What changes the cost of labor?
I'm saying that's probably your only thing that's going to continually keep creeping up. You don't have to pay for fuel really over 40 years.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry about drying up an oil well and having to build another one,
I can tell you what we'll have to worry about. There are things that are going to be unique to this situation. Mm-hmm. If we're pumping 120,000 gallons a minute, so we have to make sure that we're not drawing up the life that lives in the ocean.
Sea creatures, yeah.
Yeah, and there's big creatures and there's minuscule creatures, and we don't want any of that. So the biggest challenge to this whole project, I would say, is from an engineering standpoint, is how do we filter the water as it's coming in at such a high volume with the lowest impact? That's probably my biggest concern.
How does it compare to for a normal nuclear plant when it comes to the volumes of water?
Oh, I don't think anything out there. The only thing that's pumping this kind of volume of water is the levee system or what have you down in Louisiana. The Army Corps of Engineers installed this massive water pump from Hurricane Katrina and that whole disaster. So they came up with a new way a new levee system, and they have they installed this like massive water pump.
Yeah, just going through all that quantity of water, that seems like the main challenge of these machines that you want to build for sure.
Yeah, so it would be, I mean, the pumps that we'd have to be working with are going to be pretty massive.
Right.
So that's going to be another engineering challenge.
Well, that brings up the next question. What kind of experts are you looking to have to hire to collaborate to design such a machine? Like, who would you bring in?
You know, probably the first thing that we're looking at is the whole thermodynamic balance. You know, because we've got all these different systems that would all be competing for, you know, their share of the energy. So it's kind of mind-boggling for me to try to like work it out in my head, like how that would look.
You'd need a literal thermodynamicist.
Yeah. And so, you know, people that are experts in hydrodynamics, inorganic chemists,
and organic chemists too, because you're
okay.
Technically it's a carbon-based. Sorry, I'm just a nerd here.
Yeah, I don't really know. Do hydrocarbons qualify as inorganic or organic chemistry? I don't even know.
Organic chemistry.
Okay. Huh. All right.
Yep.
And I mean, you know, there's just we're basically looking to put this thing on something that would look like an oil platform to some degree, maybe much bigger.
So people familiar with building these huge structures.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So I mean, just to get the general schematic going, where it's going to, you know, cost probably $1 million just to kind of figure that out.
Oh, probably more than that. Like look at all of the costs for like NuScale. Most of them are regulatory though, so hopefully you guys could, you know, bypass some of that stuff. But
I doubt it. I mean,
yeah.
We're definitely going to have to. I mean, we're going to have to hire a law firm at some point to navigate all of.
Yeah. All of locate it next to BC and
yeah.
You gotta protect yourself against attacks from what is it, the Rainbow Warrior ship, the Greenpeace ship. They'll come after you.
Oh, I'll fuel them up.
You'll fuel them up. Good job.
Yeah, I'll give them free fuel. I'll pat them on their back and just say, "Good job, guys, protecting the whales. I love you. Thanks."
Right. Yeah, you'll definitely have your fair share of experts to consult.
So, speaking of bringing in people, how much funding do you need just to get that first team mobilized?
You know, so really, it's kind of hard to say because on one side, like nothing that I'm talking about is. We're not talking about putting something on Mars, okay? We don't have to not really invent anything new. There's nothing that I'm talking about, at least on the chemical side, it has to be invented. This is pretty much all off-the-shelf technology. So it's really a question of like how to best fit all of these technologies together for this unique mission. I can tell you, the nuclear reactor is probably going to be somewhere around, for the actual first facility, is going to be about 500 million, roughly.
For the reactor, or the whole platform.
The reactor.
Okay.
So, and I think you did quote earlier. You said maybe like, what'd you say?
3 billion.
3 billion per thing.
Oh yeah.
Kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of generalizing this off of looking at the cost of oil platforms, because it's like the closest thing to what we're going for. It would look something like an oil platform.
Big ass reactor on
bigger.
It. Yeah.
The reactor would actually would be dry, mind you.
Yeah.
It would be like in a cylinder, but it would be below the water line.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And
yep.
it would act as the ballast for this thing. And we would have water. We really want to avoid pumping water up above the water line because that takes a lot more energy. So I know that much. we're going to have to pump the water in such a way that we're equalizing the propulsion. So we're going to have to draw it up and then disperse it evenly in a 360 manner. Otherwise, we're going to have propulsion. And we don't want to move, and we don't want to have to struggle against, one way or the other. We just want to. So we probably need to have the propulsion like pushing the platform up, I'm thinking. But there's going to be some level of propulsion because there's going to be all this water moving. It's got to come and it's got to go. And so that's a weird thing to think about. And then above the water line, that's where the chemical factory is going to be. Okay. And then there's the question of how is it going to be, the fuel's being produced. How often are we offloading it? What's the best way to do that? And the safest way, the safest way to offload it. We don't want to have accidents out at sea. I don't want to have ships bumping into the platform, right? So how do we tackle that one? So maybe we would pipe the fuel to another platform. I don't know. So there's a lot of things to think about. Maybe we pipe it all the way to shore. I don't know. But so yeah, there's a lot of unknowns still. There's a lot to be explored, but this is not as complicated as putting someone on Mars. It's not as complicated as putting 1 million people on Mars, that's for sure.
Right. Well,
and we're talking seriously about doing that right now. So
I actually heard Elon Musk say something like that. And I'm not the biggest fan of Elon Musk, but he said something like, like entrepreneurship 101, greatly underestimate the complexity of what you're working on, because it always ends up adding up after a while. It'll come up and it'll kick your ass.
See, I've had the benefit as a kid, as a very young kid. I remember General Motors, they had their 75th anniversary, and my grandfather was like somebody who was wearing like a shirt and tie at one of these factories. And we took a day off from school and Grandpa gave us a tour of the factory. And this is like in the mid 1980s. I think it was like 1984, 85. I mean, it was pretty mind blowing for a kid. And even like when I think back on it now, I'm like, I can't believe, I saw my first robot back in 1984. I saw multiple robots back then. Because General Motors, they were using robots way back in the 80s to build cars. I saw these like huge presses. So, I mean, I might have a slightly better idea of how complicated things can get just from, my family's involvement in the automobile industry from such a young age. I had another uncle who owned a plastics factory down in Indiana. It was like
You've seen some hardcore manufacturing.
As a young kid, yeah.
Would this be built then? Are you thinking shipyard type construction, just churning them out type of? I've seen that with ideas out there. Yeah.
So we're primarily interested in getting as much done inside the United States as possible. If we have to go looking elsewhere for talent, then of course we'll do what we have to. But if we can shop in the U.S. first, then that's what we're going to do. But the biggest oil platform producers are Norway and I believe it's like Indonesia or something like that. Yeah, so we'll be looking at shipbuilders here in the U.S. But the idea is to build as much as we can, at a pier or shipping dock, and then drag the pieces out. Basically, that's what they do for oil platforms. We're also looking at probably moving shop to like Texas, so maybe the Gulf Coast is kind of like, it's either going to be the Gulf Coast or the East Coast is going to be the most likely like starting point for Poseidon Atomic.
So who would you say would be most likely to invest in a company like yours?
I would say, anybody that's, maybe concerned about the environment, any investor that wants to be, what I consider the future of the world economy. Maybe Elon Musk, maybe. I don't know. He put this thing out last week. He said that he's looking for the best decarbonization idea. So I think nobody has got a better plan than this, personally.
Decarbonizing and using
Decarbonizing the economy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Recycling carbon is basically what we're looking to do with what people consider garbage, nuclear waste. All this nuclear waste is sitting around. We've got enough nuclear waste to power the entire world for like 2,000 years.
Oh, it's nuts.
I mean, it's crazy that people think this is junk. When Rockefeller really took his company to the next level, Standard Oil, when he started his Standard Oil, it was focused on competing against whale blubber.
Yeah.
So they had these lamps. All the lamps were powered by whale blubber, and then Standard Oil came along and like, we're going to power all of these lamps with kerosene, and they were focused on kerosene. So they would process oil into kerosene, and as an extra unusable byproduct was gasoline. So they were just dumping it. Okay, they didn't have a use for it, so it was just getting dumped into streams, literally. So then there was so much of it getting dumped that Rockefeller approached Henry Ford and said, could you come up with an engine that burns this stuff? Because if you can, we'll make a lot of money.
And the light bulb was starting to cut into the oil selling part of things. They had to find a new way to
diversify.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And you talk about the fossil fuel industry. Dare I say, somebody like ExxonMobil or Shell invested something like your company?
I mean, I would think that they would be all about this.
Yeah.
I mean, it would keep their current business model essentially, on I guess they call it upstream. That's basically when they drill for the oil and they get it to the refinery, that's the upstream. So we're looking to completely revolutionize that part of it. We won't need refineries anymore. Okay, so that whole thing can just go away. But everything beyond that is completely usable. We can synthesize hydrocarbons like gasoline exactly the way the market wants it. So, I mean, it can mix with the current, status quo gasoline or kerosene or
Jet fuel.
Yeah.
Rocket fuel.
Yeah.
Diesel.
JP5.
Oh, yeah. Elon Musk should invest in something like this just to produce the kerosene he needs for his rockets.
Yeah, you can have carbon neutral rockets.
Well, we could even, because basically what we're planning on doing is just pumping the oxygen, the lion's share of the oxygen back into the ocean. If you ever look at like aquariums, like those saltwater aquariums, you've got those bubble makers. It's like basically just forcing air into the water to bring in fresh oxygen so the fish don't suffocate.
That'd be cool.
So that's basically what we're looking to do. We're going to take, because we're going to have our byproduct is going to be oxygen. So we're just going to re-impregnate the ocean with a higher pH water and oxygenated water.
And more oxygen in the atmosphere won't hurt anyone.
So we'll have plenty of oxygen to sell off to, companies like SpaceX. If they want hydrogen, we could supply all the hydrogen they want.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, that would just be like a fraction of what we're producing. So
we'd speckle the ocean with these things.
I mean, really, if you think about it, if we could just get like 28, 30 of these would supply all of the gasoline for the United States, I mean, we're not really talking, we wouldn't really need that many for like a worldwide project to, fuel everybody's needs. There's far more than 30 gas, like oil rigs out at sea. There's probably more than 30 within like 100 square miles inside the Gulf of Mexico right now.
Oh, here's one thing I just realized you should be aware of is the reason why they have oil refineries in every city is because the oil is very concentrated. Then once you purify it, it's very dilute. Like in terms of it produces a lot of gallons of gasoline per thing of oil. You would have a volume issue too, like having to carry gasoline like inland and stuff, compared to just like bringing oil in and then distributing it from there.
Yep.
I mean, I know there's a big refinery area in Texas, and I know there's one somewhere on the East Coast, and I think there's one in California. The way they do refining is pretty centralized to like a few areas of the country, and nobody is able to refine like we do. There's even like countries in the Middle East, they ship their oil over to the US, we refine it, and then ship the gasoline back to them so they can consume it in their cars. It's insane, but that's true.
It would definitely serve the coastal areas first better, and most cities are many cities are by the coast anyway, so.
Yeah, I haven't really, to be honest, I haven't really looked too hard at the distribution part of it. I've just taken like a very shallow look at it, but I don't really know enough about it to be that confident in what I'm talking about. But back to like who should be investing in this. I would definitely say, ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, those big oil companies should definitely be taking a look at what we're talking about doing, because it will increase their profit margins. It's going to increase their production, and it doesn't matter how rich you are. If the world's environment is a complete mess, it won't matter how rich you are. What are you gonna do? Live in a spacesuit?
Yeah, right.
You're gonna have your kids like walking around in spacesuits here on Earth, like that look like a
future you want to live in.
Waistline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's in everybody. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It's in your best interest to, get with the program, because wealth will not protect you against, the worst case scenarios of climate change.
So, got a question for you. So, I know there's others out there that are thinking about this. What keeps them from stealing your idea?
I've really thought carefully about why I should be telling the world about this plan, because I've had people say to me, don't talk about this. This is too good of an idea, and people will take the idea for themselves. Number one, I don't mind that. I don't mind the idea that other people are thinking about it and talking about it and looking for ways to make synthetic fuels based off of nuclear energy. Number one, if I did keep it to myself, or we kept it in a very small circle, and then let's say I got in a car accident or something like that, and all of a sudden I'm not able to advance my plan, then there's a risk that the plan would just die with me. So that would be terrible. But here's the real reason why I'm not worried about anyone stealing this idea. It's because if you don't have the Elysium reactor, I don't think you're going to be able to be competitive with fossil fuel. The Elysium reactor is the key to success in this whole thing, because you don't have to fuel it for 4 decades. It runs off of nuclear waste. The reactor is very small and very, very powerful, 5 gigawatts in thermal energy. an incredible amount of energy for such a small package that can fit into a platform that's out at sea.
So it just ties into that reactor design just so nicely that, that's the secret ingredient.
The only way you're going to steal this idea is just to steal Elysium away from me. So,
well, we've kind of reached the end of our time here today. Do you have anywhere listeners can go to learn about Poseidon Atomic or you?
I have a pretty shallow website right now. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me. I'm Jona Adams on LinkedIn or Poseidon Atomic on LinkedIn. If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to shoot me an email. I'm Jona Adams at PoseidonAtomic.com. That's JONA.ADAMS at POSEIDON atomic.com. More than happy to answer any questions. And, hopefully in the next 6 months, we're going to have a more robust media campaign videos that kind of explain, where we're planning on going and things like that. Right. In the meantime, I'm just relying on social media and my email.
Yeah. Perfect. Jona, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a bunch, Jona. We'll talk to you later.
I really appreciate you guys letting me do this, and now I'll go ahead and edit the show.
Oh, no problem. Now get
back in the other seat. Yeah. That was a fun conversation with Jona. We hope Poseidon Atomic sees progress in achieving their goals. Such a piece of technology would be truly remarkable and would help solve a critical part of the fossil fuel emissions problem.
Totally. As we have all heard before, a great journey must begin with a single step. Poseidon has a long road ahead, and we wish the company the best. Bold ideas like this are what we need to address such large issues like climate change.
Bill, what was your main takeaway from the conversation?
As the title of this episode suggests, I love the idea of totally rethinking the oil rig. If such a technology Jona suggests comes to fruition, it would totally change how we think about the energy supply. Instead of being something based on a diminishing resource marred with pollution issues, we could think of it as inexhaustible and clean. We could evolve past the idea of an extractive economy and towards the idea of a circular economy. I can imagine hundreds of these things speckling the seas, tirelessly and safely producing hydrocarbons with no climate side effects. What a dramatic improvement that would be over the stinking, dirty black sludge we call oil. How about you, DJ? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, a big thing that was running through my mind is how there have been many nuclear companies that have entered the playing field. I think that at this point, it's kind of a more the merrier type of situation. I think that it's super important that there are several nuclear companies considering getting into the synthetic fuels game. If we can achieve cost-effective, carbon-neutral fuels, that's a game changer. I love that there are great minds coming to this realization.
Absolutely. We want to thank our guest, Jona Adams, for coming on and talking about Poseidon Atomic and decarbonizing the transportation sector.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode entitled Beyond the Oil Rig.
This is Phil Ord
and DJ LeClaire
signing off.
If you like what you heard and want more content, you can support Americans for Nuclear Energy's Climate Fix podcast on a per-episode basis with Patreon. Link in the description. To support Americans for Nuclear Energy and our general mission, visit our website at www.americansfornuclearenergy.org. All words. Again, that's www.americansfornuclearenergy.org. We have a link to donate with PayPal under the Mobilize page. You can also purchase some Americans for Nuclear Energy swag under our store page. This will really help us pay for the little things, especially online service fees, to keep our organization running. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and YouTube. Lastly, we really want your feedback. Let us know your thoughts, questions, and concerns. We have a message form on our website under the About section, or you could email us directly at main@americansfornuclearenergy.org. All words. Again, that's main@americansfornuclearenergy.org. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Americans for Nuclear Energy's Climate Fix podcast. We'll see you next time.
Edited and produced by Jona Adams.